Hello, everybody. We're here for Tuesday Talks. Now, Tuesday Talks is all about getting to know an individual and finding out what makes them tick, what do they care about, how their career reflects that, and what motivates them to keep going. Now, today's guest is Nikhil Toser. Now, Nikhil has everything that society tells us to have, right? So he has an amazing family, amazing house. Um, Everything was great, but he was undiagnosed as a bipolar. He had a bipolar disorder, which was undiagnosed for a long time, and he was challenged with suicidal tendencies as well within that time. Now he got diagnosed by the age 40 that he had bipolar disorder, and also he then turned his life around to where he is now. We're gonna get Nikhil on and get us to obviously expand onto that story and share his journey with us. So let me just get Nikhil on. I see you there, Nikhil. Let me just invite you up.
Hey, I'm great.
Hi,
Zishan,
Nikhil.
how
How
are
are you
you
doing?
doing? Am I pronouncing your name right? It's Zishan, right?
That is correct. Yes, thank you very much. I am doing fantastic. Thank you very much for taking the time out and jumping on to Tuesday Talks for sharing your amazing
Yeah, thanks
journey
for
with
having me.
us.
It's great to be here.
I've done a short introduction for you already, Nikhil, but you're the amazing person to do it justice. So why don't just let the audience know who you are and what you do. And the biggest question that everybody has on Tuesday's Talk is, why do you
Yeah,
do
so
it,
again,
Nikhil?
thanks for having me on, Zishan. Like I said, like I was telling you before, I've been watching your Tuesday talks. I've really enjoyed the conversations you've had, some amazing guests that I've had on my podcast as well. So it's always awesome to connect with people who are aligned in terms of vision and purpose and all that good stuff. So yeah, in terms of, it's interesting because like I have a podcast, I interview people, but then when I'm on the other side of the chair, it's always a challenge. I'm like, oh, geez, now I gotta tell my story, but I'll do my best. So in terms of present day, right now I live in Chicago with my wonderful wife, three kids. My wife and I run a stem cell therapy company called GeoStar Chicago. So we help patients suffering from broad variety of disorders, whether it's knee pain or COPD or multiple sclerosis, just a whole host of disorders where people who have tried different therapeutic approaches such as medication or surgery hasn't been effective. So they've come to us for one last chance. And it's been a really rewarding journey helping these patients sort of get a new lease on life. So when I look at my life right now, I'm extremely happy with the way things are going. As I mentioned, I have a podcast called Untether Your Life, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, where we talk about it. It was informed by my journey with mental health. As you had mentioned, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at the age of 40, which is about 7 years ago, but I'd struggled with it for 2 decades undiagnosed. And it was a pretty horrific journey, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, I think the silver lining to that cloud, Zishan, is that it really gave me a perspective about mental health, and not just mental health, but specifically in through the lens of the South Asian diaspora. As I talk about on the podcast, my parents came to this country, the U.S. They came to the U.S. from India, and I would say by and large, things worked out very well on a material level, but in terms of um, psychological issues, I think was just something that is changing. I think there is more focus being devoted to awareness of mental health concerns and managing your mental wellness, but that wasn't always the case. So it was always something that was kind of swept under the rug. And over time, what my wife and I realized is that, when you try to suppress issues, when you try to push things down, ultimately it ends up, the analogy I use is like when you go to a movie, when you see a movie And you tell a kid to clean up his room. What does he do? He stuffs everything in the closet. And then, one day you open the closet and everything just, you're drowning in cricket bats, baseball bats, basketballs, whatever the case is. Yeah. And so my
100%.
closet opening, I guess you could say, that was about 7 years ago when, as you had alluded to, on paper, I had everything I wanted in terms of, having gone to the best business school, great companies, great house, everything sort of on paper, I had quote unquote made it. But really there was a lot of turmoil under the surface, and that's when it really erupted. But, through awareness, through a lot of introspection, through embracing a lot of modalities that, interestingly enough, are in our toolkit as South Asians, like meditation, Ayurveda, pranayama, all these things that we had grown up around, starting to re-engage with a lot of these techniques is really what helped me, in addition to the conventional approaches like medication and cognitive behavioral therapy. So I consider myself very lucky to be at this point in my journey. It's definitely a far cry from where I was about 7 years ago.
And I love this. I love this journey that you've shared with us. Being, and you touched upon some subject that are a little bit close to my heart as well, coming from a South Asian family as well. It's one of those taboo subject that it does not happen. No, it is here.
Yeah.
Look,
yeah.
No, that does not exist. You're not seeing it. It's there are never there's no mental health issues. It's something happens in Europe.
It's the elephant in the room
outside.
It's outside. It's hiding in plain sight, whatever expression you want to use. Now, just curious, Ishan, what is your background? Obviously, you're in the UK now, but where is your family from originally?
So my dad's from Bangladesh, and my mom's from Pakistan. Yeah, so that's the background there, and I can relate to it because I can see how these things just, as you're saying, they get brushed under the rug every time. It's just there, and you're saying it's there. You can see they are challenged, they are psychologically being disturbed, and the person is, but no, you need to
stiff upper lip, as the British
keep
say,
the family
right?
name up. Yes, yeah, exactly. Stiff upper, and you need to keep the family name up. Make sure that your everybody who is seeing you also knows that you are from this family, so you have to toughen up. Whatever, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or a kid. You need to uphold the family name. So that's a big thing that I've come across. I don't know if it was the same case in yours as well, even though your family
100%. I mean, and one of the other challenges, Ishan, is just that there's that saying that all that glitters is not gold. I think that in our culture there is this tendency to ascribe value based on the, I don't know what it is in the UK, but I always say the US News and World ranking of the college you went to is always an indication of your worth, in terms of your parents' eyes, or standing in the community. The other thing I always say is there's some type of formula where it's, the number of trophies on your mantle or all these accolades there's a proxy, it's a value, it's sort of a reflection of what your worth is in their eyes. And again, this is not something that I necessarily fault my parents or any parents who are immigrants for this mentality, because I think it just comes with the territory, because it's all motivated by this, I'm sure you're familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where there's at the baseline, there's that need for survival. When you come to another culture where, the proverbial $8 or 8 pounds or whatever the sum is in your pocket in a bag of spices, I always say, there's this need, to really do whatever you can to make it up the food chain. And to be honest, mental health for a lot of immigrants is a luxury. Ironically, what's just amazing in all of this is that my father was actually a psychiatrist. He's retired now. And again, people always say, how did he not see the signs? What I always tell them is that sometimes, not always, but sometimes this can be a a detriment being a mental health professional, if you think about it, right? Because, and just like, what is your career again? I know we've probably talked about this before, but what line of work are you in? So
I'm a project
imagine
manager.
looking at Gantt charts or project plans when you come home. I mean, it's the last thing you want to do, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
talk about milestones and deliverables. You want to, talk about what was on TV last night, or so I'm making that point, Zishan, because I feel that it was probably very challenging for my father to see what was, as I say, hiding in plain sight. The fact that one semester in college I would be doing extremely well, thriving on very little sleep, and then the next semester or over break, not being able to get out of bed. Those are, to the outside observer, those are the telltale signs of bipolar disorder. But I think for somebody with, number one, being a therapist and living and breathing it all day long, and number two, being of South Asian descent, being in this immigrant rat race, I think it is difficult to come to grips with that. So, my heart goes out to anybody who has to navigate this journey, with those blinders on.
Yeah, no, no, that's definitely I can understand that, because and I was even thinking of a very, a basic relatable journey that I'm actually experiencing. We've got a rear garden
Mm-hmm.
extension being built currently as well. So the builder that is doing that is also doing his own, and is on our street as well. But his own
Mm-hmm.
project that he's doing in his house is always delayed and slow, because he's obviously doing
Sure.
all that stuff outside for other people, getting paid for it. By the time he comes home, he's like, yeah, I don't want to be doing this anymore. So the days off he gets, he's obviously
Yeah.
out and about with his family and everything. He's just not doing, So that's what happens with every line of work that you're doing. It when you're not looking at if it's actually happening where you are, when at your home place, or where you are happening. So obviously, because by that time you literally are switching off, or just not picking up because you're winding down, right? So you're just winding it down and you're not picking it up. So yeah, it is something that's a good point that you raised there, and I can completely see this. So now you're also had these suicidal tendencies, or and so take us through, if you can, what was that like? Because people who may
Mm-hmm.
be also challenged with those sort of tendencies can see and
Sure.
learn how
Yeah.
were you able to manage
So,
those.
what I always say is bipolar disorder is probably one of the cruelest disorders. And when I say that, what I mean is that when you're going through the disorder, for people who don't know, there's two phases to it. There's the mania, then there's the depression. There's other nuances, but in a large sense, those are the two different phases of bipolar disorder. So when you're manic, you're on a high. You're high as a kite, as the expression goes, and you almost, the analogy I use is the movie Limitless. I don't know if you've seen that with Bradley Cooper. There's
I,
also a TV show, but
I
the
don't
sum of
remember
that
seeing
is,
it yet.
Ishan, is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
the guy, he's sort of puttering around. He's in a very low state, and then he ingests this substance called NZT, and he becomes Superman. He's on top of the world. He can, he makes these investments, makes millions of dollars, and then he's able to learn languages like in overnight. And so he's almost like I said, like this Superman type of identity. And then one day he runs out of
Mm-hmm.
the NZT and then he crashes. And that's really what bipolar disorder is like, is just that when you are going through this manic phase, you're on top of the world. And there's no one-to-one correlation where it's like, oh, all of the best artists are, have bipolar disorder. But there is a correlation because there is this mindset, there is this proclivity towards creativity. There's this, putting together collages and, all these different. I think Vincent Van Gogh, he's sort of like the poster boy for bipolar disorder. Somebody said that they've
Mm-hmm.
seen Limitless. Yeah, they said it's a
Yes.
great film. But to go from that, where you are on top of the world and nobody else understands your quote unquote genius, and then all of a sudden it's some idle comment, some precipitating event. All of a sudden you go from that euphoria to this inability to get out of bed. You're just completely incapacitated. And so that's, that was the cycle that I went through, is just going from what I'd call as dizzying highs and then incapacitating lows. So when you ask about the suicidal tendencies, this wasn't something that was a constant, but with bipolar disorder, what happens is eventually it's like, how many more times can I go through this? Where it's like you've been on top of the world, and then all of a sudden it's like, someone punctures your balloon and then you're brought back to earth. So that was really devastating for me. And when the suicidal tendencies came about was, I had gone through this phase where I was just hell bent on breaking ties with my wife. Now we are very happily married. We've worked together. It's, everything's great. But at the time, and this is common with a lot of people with bipolar disorder, they think that there's nothing wrong with them. They have no awareness. They think that it's a bad boss, or it's a bad, sibling, or in my case, it's a bad wife, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to divorce my wife. I'm going to move out of the house and everything will be perfect. And of course, ultimately I found out that was not the case. And when I found that there was really nothing for me to point the fingers at, it was just, I could do no right. That was when, I started considering, taking my life. The other aspect is, my family unfortunately was not as supportive as they could have been. My father, even though he's a mental health professional, I think it was just too much for him. So he had sort of turned his back on me. He had said like, oh, he's called me like a sociopath and, Academy Award winning actor. Obviously these are things coming from a position of pain. I don't judge him for any of these things that he said. These were, he was going through a lot of pain of his own. So again, I don't, fault him for any of the things that were said or done. But it was a very stark, the analogy that I use is, I had been looking through the looking glass, like in Alice in Wonderland. I had this distorted view of reality where everything was beautiful and colors were so magnificent. And then it's like all of a sudden the rug was pulled out. So yeah, that was where the suicidal tendencies came about. Yeah.
Wow, and I can just imagine, obviously I have not experienced this, but I can just imagine how difficult that would have been because this is, people, we talk about roller coaster ride. You are literally having that roller coaster highs and lows. So you're literally screaming when you're going down, waiting for the excitement to go back up. But that down is so down that you're like, whoa, when is the up happening? And that's what I'm hearing, right? So it's amazing to then see that you were able to turn around, I would like to say a 180 or 360 turn, but obviously you can expand onto that and let us know. So what was the pivotal moment for you then that came about where you were like, you know what?
Yeah.
Enough is enough. And let's do this.
I've talked about this on other podcasts. My wife and I, like I said, we are very happy together now. Obviously, as with any marriage, there's ups and downs, but for the most part, by and large, I couldn't be happier. But interestingly enough, Zishan, if you've known anyone who's gone through divorce, it is one of the most acrimonious experiences you can imagine, where it's like, especially when you have 3 kids together. And so interestingly enough, I was like, we were not even communicating. We were speaking through lawyers, we just could not see eye to eye on anything. And a lot of this was predicated on the fact that interestingly enough, she was the one who wanted me to get help. She was the one who said, I have seen you through ups and downs. This is definitely bipolar disorder. I'm not a mental health professional. I don't want to diagnose you, but I have enough, as they say, data to piece this together. And it really makes, it has all signs of bipolar disorder. So she was the one who was constantly telling me, you need to get some treatment. I don't care what happens to our marriage, but, I want you to have a healthy life. I want you to be there for the kids. So she was the one who said, why don't you seek treatment? And so again, the precipitating factor was after I had lost, the 5th job in 6 years, after, I had been pretty much kicked out of my apartment. It just basically had nothing. the analogy I use is that there's this whole concept of surrender. There's this whole concept of there's real power in that. When you stop thinking that you can control everything and you just surrender, and there's that Bruce Lee quote, be like water and just let, surrender to the flow. And that's really what I did, was just realize that, what I'm doing is not working. So I, as they say, wave the white flag, and I let my wife sort of take things into her hands. And with mental health, it's a very dire situation. I'm not sure what it is in the UK, but I was, unfortunately, like, if I were to wait to see a mental health professional, a therapist, it would have been weeks or months, and I didn't have that time. So I actually had to go for inpatient hospitalization. So, colloquially, a mental ward, basically. So I was inpatient in mental ward essentially for about 3 weeks. And it was pretty horrific, and if you think about it, it's a pretty humbling experience, because you're going from being an executive at the top banks, you're being wooed by recruiters, and, to be C-level titles and all this stuff that, that you can show off, and just being stripped of that, and just being basically one of the general population, so I had to go through hospitalization, get the diagnosis. What the other thing that I want to bring up, Zishan, that's important, I think, for the listeners to know, is that one of the things that is so difficult with bipolar disorder is that not nobody, but very few people go in to seek treatment when they're manic. Because if, as I was saying earlier, you're on top of the world, you have all the answers, it's everyone else who has a problem, right? So why would you get treatment? So I would only seek treatment when I would fall into a depression. And if with this disorder, if you treat bipolar disorder with just an antidepressant, the analogy I use is like taking a match and throwing it onto a pile of dynamite dunked in gasoline. It's a catastrophic event, because if there's no mood stabilizer to balance it out, it can kickstart another mania. So fortunately, when I was hospitalized, my wife was there to give the doctor the full picture, the 360 picture, this saying, like, he's in a very low state right now, but he's had episodes of mania followed by depression. So, look at it with that lens, as opposed to just seeing, what's presenting in front of you. So really, again, just surrendering and just realizing that I had someone in my corner, and I have someone in my corner who knows the real me and can see beyond just what's presented in terms of the diagnosis.
And I really love the share that you've just shared with us here. On also, what I'm taking away from there is be acceptable of your vulnerability and surrender to it, because that's what I heard, right? So you even though you realize you were having the amazing highs, top of the world, you're the best person out there, and being wooed up, and everything. And then you also were having the worst downs where everybody was against you, right? So it's nothing wrong with you. Everybody's out there to get you. And it's amazing that, you were able to realize that, that there's that swing is happening, right? So it's a bit like you're on the seesaw, and you're like, yeah, I am on the seesaw, but you knew when the ups were happening, when the downs were happening, and you're like, okay, I need to get off this seesaw now and get some help to actually balance the seesaw, right? Just have it on a balance, and that's amazing that obviously you had your wife who was able to hold that and say, okay, here's the space. Let's create that space for you to recover, to be you, not for her, but at least for the kids, right? So which catapulted this journey and where you are here now. And it's amazing that obviously you two started this stem cell work together, and you are obviously giving it back to the community and the world, to your patients that come along as their last resource to get the support they need. And you've obviously then created this wonderful podcast of yours, Untethered. What was it called again? Untether Your Life. So take us through that then. Obviously that came about because of the mental health challenges and so forth. and obviously you're a biggest mental health advocate because of that. So yeah, take us through that. What's its purpose,
Yeah,
and
no, I
what's it's trying to achieve?
appreciate the question. So the interesting thing about Untether Your Life, Sishan, is it's really impressed upon me the power of the word serendipity. And when I say that, what I mean is, I never, 5 years ago, I wasn't sitting there thinking, you know what, my 5-year plan, I'm going to be a podcast host, and I'm going to be going on Instagram lives with people in the UK, because I think you're like the third person, for some reason, people in the UK, and talking about mental health. But what's interesting is Untether Your Life sort of sprang from this journey with Shelley and me to capture our story, write a book about our journeys with mental health. And so initially, because we had also written a book, we're working on a movie. Initially, it was intended as a platform to showcase the book and the movie, so just sort of repurposing a lot of interviews that Shelley and I had done on different podcasts. But, I saw that there was a real need to not just tell our story, but make this a two-way dialogue, invite people on from a broad, variety of life, from a broad variety of walks of life. So it's mental health professionals, it's folks in the South Asian diaspora. We've had some folks who, there's actually a column written about it in Psychology Today about journey through mental health, in the South Asian diaspora. But really, it's about bringing out voices of people who doesn't have to be bipolar disorder. They don't have to be of South Asian descent, but bringing to the forefront people who have what I call untethered their lives. Because the whole concept behind that is, when you think about a boat at harbor, there's this safety, there's this security, and then, setting sail. That can be a very scary thing, especially, when you're encountering turbulence in the water, but ultimately it can lead to a very rewarding journey. And that's what I feel, obviously life isn't perfect, but I feel like that's something that we did because we broke free from the tethers of society, whether it be the cultural stigma against mental health. I could have easily said, there's folks that I know who are in complete denial, where they say, I'm fit as a fiddle, I'm just having a bad day, or, I can survive on very little sleep, and somehow, I'm like immune to it. There's no sense of maybe I should look inward and see if there is some issues that I need to work on, so we've really, I think, in a sense, untethered ourselves from conventional modes of thought about mental illness in the South Asian community. The other thing is, like I had gone for this conventional career path, which is, getting an MBA, working in management consulting, sort of quote unquote doing everything right. But I realized that was not really for me. That was not my, the Eastern notion of Dharma. That was really not what was my, my destiny and what really aligned with my soul purpose. So starting this stem cell therapy business, working on it with my wife, but then also writing the book and then launching this podcast. Again, if I were to look 5 years ago, is this what I would have seen sort of in the crystal ball? Not necessarily. But it's really given me a lot of purpose. It's definitely, I think, made me feel like I'm making an impact because, you're a podcast host as well. And, we all want to get to the fame of like a Lewis Howes or a Jay Shetty. That would be great. But, we always also need to remember, I'm sure you've had this experience too, where it's like a listener comes to you and says, that episode you did about psychedelic therapy for trauma, that really resonated with me. And I started examining this as a modality for the trauma that I was facing. Or, my sibling has been, going through a lot of turmoil. And I think I played him your episode and he's starting to consider going to seek treatment. So those kinds of wins, I think, really, help me feel like I'm making a difference. And again, just, I think having that purpose has really helped me in my, in my journey of mental health to feel that I, am on the right track.
I really love this, and I believe someone's thrown up a question here as well. So if we take a
Hmm.
second to see if you can answer that, asking, what would you tell someone who is going through a tough time at this very moment and doesn't know where to start? So what would you tell
No,
that
that's a
someone?
great question because I mean, the analogy I always use is, trying to get mentally healthy. It's kind of like the analogy would be like boiling the ocean. This is an iterative process. It's not something that you can just sort of flip the switch and all is well. So I think it really depends on, where you are geographically. In the U.S., I mean, again, fortunately, I had a leg up because I had such an amazing, supportive wife. Who supported me even when my own family wouldn't. But I would say that really mental health resources, like in the US, we have NAMI. I don't know if what they have in, I'm not sure the caller or poster where they're from, but if you don't have family, I would say definitely uh, lean on resources like NAMI. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, because there is
Mm,
definitely strength in community. That they've done studies, uh, and they've found that I think that people who are deprived of those connections, that can induce not just mental uh, problems, but also physical problems. We store a lot of our trauma. There's the notion of chakras. We store a lot of our trauma in our bodies. So
mhm,
definitely find a community that you can uh, relate to, that you can share these stories with, because I think that can be very valuable. The other thing is um, educate yourself on different modalities, because definitely I think medication and cognitive therapy are important. But what I have found to be just a force multiplier has been these modalities that, again, are literally at our fingertips. As South Asians, this is something that, meditation, pranayam, that has been so instrumental for us. Just explore these things. And this is not a plug, this is not an endorsement, but one of the things that you and I obviously, I think, is that a logo in your on your background? It's Mind Valley. I think that's definitely a resource. It's obviously it's a paid membership, but they have a wealth of resources online that you can access for free. Just things like breath work. Just focusing on that breath. I think
mhm.
the Soma breath is the one that I'm sure you're familiar with, but they talk. Yeah, it's
Oh
a
yeah,
total
with
game
Niraj.
changer. That when you're just focusing on your breath, you can really, it's almost like a remote control where you can press pause on life. And I found that to be instrumental in helping me to manage my mental health. So obviously, this is a lot of information, but I would say rather, beyond just specific concrete steps, I would say it's, you know, remembering that this is a marathon and not a sprint. You know, don't beat yourself up
Mm,
if you have, down days. I do this all the time myself. I mean, I'm constantly beating myself up like, why am I not as productive as this person, or, getting into that comparison trap. Just, focus on yourself and try to go small. Don't try to um, achieve all as the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. Just keep that in mind.
mhm. I really love this answer as well, and which is leading me to a question I had coming up just before that. So, some people like to call it
Hmm.
routine, some people like to call it ritual. So, is there one for you since you've done this, pivotal moment? So, is that something, obviously, you've probably tried and tested quite a few. What's working for you now, if you're able to share that? Is that a morning routine or evening routine before you go to bed?
Yeah, I
What
mean,
do you do?
as I was saying, I think breath work is a must. It's a non-negotiable, because I get so wrapped up, with running a business, with having three kids, with being married, just trying to get through the day. And so I think if I have that 15, 20 minutes in the morning, where I try these different meditations, and the beauty is, there are so many different, that's why it's called an inner pharmacy, because there's not just a one size fits all. There are so many different techniques you can do for different purposes. So, like, let's say you're having indigestion. Um, don't quote me on this, but and I always, my Indian friends always make fun of me for my pronunciation, but I think it's pronounced kapalbhati. It can really help with digestion. And then there's another one, Rishaka, which is basically controlling the amount of inhales with exhales. And so, yeah, I think, again, this is not a pitch for Soma Breath per se, but this is just the one that I'm not getting any commission or anything. But I would just say that it is something that is so powerful, because it's not like, because I've always been, and this is something you can do as well, but running is something that's very important to me, because just getting the heart, the blood pumping and exercise and just getting some fresh air, I think can be very helpful. I've never been one of those people who's into going to the gym and pumping iron, as they say. And that's why I love breath work, because it's something you can do whatever, whenever. If you're waiting at the post office and you're frustrated, or if you get an email that's frustrating or a text message, it's just something that you can just step back and just get in tune with your body, get out of that fight or flight mode, and activate that parasympathetic response that can just, that can make a world of difference for any situation.
And I really love this, and I 100% agree with the breath work of side. It's quite new to me. I mean, I'm aware of the breath work, and I've never practiced and everything, but I've made this new friend who is brilliant at getting me actually pinned down to do the breath work. And what I've noticed is that a lot of time, for me, it would have been a case of like frustration or anxiousness, right? So me as well, being an entrepreneur and running few bits and bobs. I love editing stuff and creating all this. So I'm creating all these things, and you're anxious and why is it not finishing and everything. And he will just go, right, Zishan, right, put your hand here, take deep breath like this, and he will guide me through the breath work. And I'm like, within 2 minutes, all that is gone. And what I was frustrated with is done in 5 minutes after that. And I was like, wow. And so he's been brilliant support with that, and I'm sure he hasn't told me what it is, because I'm sure he's probably is so much, because obviously he's plugged into Mind Valley as well. So but yeah, he's definitely got me looking into more of this breath work. And there's something that I read somewhere, how turtles or tortoise, don't quote me on which one is which, but they are the people, they're the animals that breathe the longest and slowest as well. So, and hence they are able to live that long as well, because they breathe so slow. So where, if we are taking 10 breaths, let's say in 1 minute we are taking 10 breaths, they take in 1 minute, they will take one breath, and because it's that long, and exhale is that long. And I was like, wow. And hence calm, they are always, living the longest as well, because they're calm and they're serene as well. So the breath definitely helps to release whatever that is going through you.
I mean,
and calm you down, right?
That's the whole foundation of it, was studying animals. There are different animals that live different durations. And I literally was looking at the slide this morning, I think, but I think I'm trying to think which animal lives the longest, but it's because they breathe the slowest. That's what pranayam. Pranayam is, if you look at the etymology of it, it's life force. Prana is God, I'm getting my the sequence mixed up, but the bottom line is it's life force. It's just harnessing that that force. It's so important, and it's something that is so easy to lose sight of, because we get so bogged down with doing that we forget to get involved in being.
Exactly. I mean, and it's nobody's fault as well. It's just how the society has programmed us to do, like just keep moving forward and look at what's next and what's this and what's that. And what happened is in all of that chaos and all of that things that are happening around you, forget to be the stillness that is required. So I actually, this was about 3-4 years ago that I actually said to myself, and I started following that to find the calmness in chaos, find the center of the storm. That's where actually the peace and most calmness is. If you're seeing the cyclone or tornado, whatever that is, if you're able to find the middle, Obviously, I'm not saying go right into it. There are
Right.
crazy people who go and drive into it, but I'm not saying to not do that. But they have actually experienced it, that once they are in, they find that center, and it's the most calmest place in the whole of that chaos, which is creating outside it. And that's what it is. So if you find yourself in a chaotic situation and everything, you need to straight away obviously do that breath work. If you need to find that calm and stillness, find that stillness that is you, and then you'll see everything will just drop and be with you at once, and and you'll be able to understand and take it in, whatever that you were doing, finish it. And I love that you just touched upon, and that just reminded me of that. We will be finishing this episode shortly as well now, and I love that you shared this wonderful journey of yours, and definitely helped me understand the bipolar side of things, because I'm not 100% aware of the ups and downs that comes with it. And it's something that I've just only seen on TV, films and things like that. So, but hearing it from you is hit home, and I was like, wow, it is, it is real. It's there, right? So, and seeing you that you've turned around and brought your life back up from where you were, it's such an amazing that you're now here and helping others, and on this episode as well, to inspire others to take that leap as well, in terms of there is a way to come out of wherever you are. So before we finish this, I would like to also ask, if you are able, what would you like to say to the viewers and the listeners before we wrap this up and leave? What would you like to say as a wrap-up comment?
And again, thanks so much for having me on, Zishan. This was an amazing conversation. I would say that the thing that is important is to, this is one of the missions of our podcast and just my journey in general, but just break free of the templates. And what I mean by that is, obviously we've all written documents, you being a project manager, you've worked on a project plan, so you've seen probably more templates than you can care to remember. So templates, I think, are very helpful, right? Because if you're new to a certain domain, and you're trying to get a leg up, I think they can be helpful because they provide the structure, they provide just the skeleton, if you will, for how to move forward. But I think a lot of us were handed templates, when we were younger, especially as South Asians, especially as immigrants, because we were told that, the analogy or the expression I always say is doctor, engineer, lawyer, or failure. It's one of these four buckets that you could fall into, and without that, absent that, you're not really positioned for success. And as we all know, that's complete bunk, because there are so many things that, there's doctors out there. Obviously, there are many who are very happy and successful, but there's doctors out there who are miserable. They have everything on paper. They have all the things that, they were supposed to do, but there's this existential crisis. They don't really know which way is up, because they're not really happy with what they're doing day to day. And then again, then there's people like myself who, my career has gone through, more twists and turns than the city of Florence. I think on a map, like I think of all the winding, it's been a very long and winding road. But I think I've arrived at a place that, I'm very happy with. And I definitely broke a lot of the templates, because this is, again, 5 years ago, if you had asked me, this is definitely not where I would have said I would be. But I think it was just questioning a lot of those definitions of what success looks like. And I'm trying to impart that on my kids as well. So it's not all about going to the top university. That would be nice. But I think if you're going home and you have ulcers and you have all this anxiety and you just feel like you're in this constant rat race and comparison with the person next to you, that's no way to live, and ultimately I think that's gonna come back to bite you. Same thing with the templates of what, our conceptions of mental health, which I think we've talked about already, but just, not necessarily saying like, I am my diagnosis and I can only, I have to just take medication. I have to do exactly as my doctor says, obviously follow that, but really own your own health and take ownership of how you're managing your day-to-day, how you feel, and engage in, and embrace things like breath work, meditation, yoga, and, a lot of these things that I think society might have deemed as quote unquote woo-woo or esoteric or etheric. Just give them a try. What's the worst that can happen? So yeah, those would be the last things I would say. And there's one last quote I always like to refer to is, it's from Joseph Campbell. He's the guy behind the hero's story, and also Finding Your Bliss. But the quote is, we must let go of the life that was planned for us in order to accept the one that is waiting for us. And so I just think that even if you have everything made and everything is going great on paper, just rethink it. Just think about if this is really sort of what are you finding your bliss? So
I really love that. Now this
sure.
just prompted me to just ask you something more. One more question is, if you had now had to sum this episode up in one sentence, what would that be?
Sum this episode in one sentence. Yeah, I guess sum this episode up in one sentence. I guess I would just say, like, don't accept highs and lows as the final outcome. Realize that even in your darkest days, I think even in your darkest days, if you accept the power of surrender, there can be really magical outcomes on the other side. And don't think that you have all the answers. Just really rely on. Remember that, as the saying goes, it takes a village, and embrace the power of community in finding those outcomes. At the same time, don't blindly follow the herd. So it's always finding finding that fine line between those two extremes.
I love that. Now, thank you very much, Nikhil, for sharing a wonderful journey of yours. And I want to also say thank you to the listeners on the Instagram live at the moment, and the listeners that will be listening to this episode when this turns into a podcast on all the podcast channels. So I just wanted to remind everybody, if you were listening to this and you had an inspirational moment or an aha moment anywhere around this episode, now it's our duty to share this episode with whomever that's popped into your mind, or you think that should be listening to this, because it's our duty to share the inspiration with others. We need to share that spark that was created within us by listening to this, because all it takes is that spark to get that person going, taking that action, to move that person. If you are sitting on a fence and thinking of trying out something new, because we don't know who's just gone to bed or just woken up thinking of a better day. And if this episode created that spark in you, it might just make a better day for them as well. So thank you very much, Nikhil, again, for sharing this amazing journey.
Thanks so much
here for everybody as well.
If you don't mind, I would just wanted to say one last thing. If anyone here is listening, and wants to connect, my Instagram handle is Untether Your Life, and the name of my podcast is Untether Your Life, and it's available at untetheryourlife.co, or you can just search for it on any of the podcast platforms that you listen to.
Yeah, no, that I will be tagging those in the post, and when this gets posted as a podcast, it will be there as well. Your Instagram will be tagged there, so they can obviously find everything once they get to your Instagram. But thank you very much, everybody, again, and thank you, Nikhil. We'll see everybody on the next Tuesday with another.
Thanks so much, Ishan. Take care.
Bye bye.